Cole's men lay sleeping, many of them no doubt dreaming of their sweethearts and loved ones at home. No one who has not experienced a night attack from an enemy can form the slightest conception of the feelings of one awakened in the dead of night, with the din of shots and yells coming from those thirsting for your blood. Those lines come from the post-war reminiscences of one of the men in Cole's cavalry who was camped up here on Loudoun Heights on that January night in 1864. And I think it really speaks to the terror that these men must have felt, awakened from their sleep on this freezing cold evening to the shouts and screams and shots of Mosby's Rangers as they came crashing over the crest of the hill just a few hundred yards in that direction. So, Rich, they've come up that draw that we were at just a few moments ago, leading their horses up single file. They're finally in position. Stringfellow's attack on Cole's headquarters fails, and it alerts Cole's men to the approach of Mosby's Rangers. What happens? Sounds like all hell breaks loose.
Well, after the friendly fire incident, Mosby's men, who had been leading their horses up from the draw, unhorsed, now get on their horses to charge into the camp. It was a standard charge order, and with pistols in each hand, fingers wrapped, virtually cemented onto their pistols, they attack this tent camp. And we know a bit about what this was like due to the reminiscences of one of the fellows who was there, a fellow by the name of George Vernon. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about what he saw and his role.
So George Vernon, he's captain of Company A of Cole's Cavalry. He is going to be really the one who takes charge of the defense of this camp. As we said, Cole is across the street in his headquarters. He's just escaped an attempt to capture him. So it's really up to Vernon to rally the men to repel this charge. And so Vernon is going to try and anchor this defensive line on an old log cabin that's out in the field. And what he's going to do, probably the smartest thing he does, is he's going to give the order. He's going to shout at Cole's men as they're emerging from their tents to not mount up, and instead to lay low and take aim at the men on horseback. Knowing Mosby's men are the only mounted men on the field at this point. They're going to be silhouetted against the snow. They're going to be silhouetted against the sky. They're going to be inviting targets for the Cole's men, and they are going to make good use of their carbines during this fight. Mosby's men are charging in with loaded pistols. They're firing into the tents. They're going to be receiving fire from Cole's men on the ground. There's going to be an attempt to set some of the tents on fire by some of Mosby's men, but it really very quickly kind of goes south for Mosby's men who are making this attack.
It certainly does. Indeed, there is at least one memoir of a ranger who says that the casualties taken at this fight in these fields beyond us, just east of the heights at Loudoun, the Loudoun Heights, will cause Mosby to cry. And people only remember that once. Once in 1915 when he visited the Rector House where he had formed the 43rd Battalion, and after this. It was the loss of two officers in particular that bothered him. One of them was the commander of Company B, Captain Smith. And we actually have a picture of Captain Smith, and he was said to be a superb officer. Here he is. It's actually a sketch. You could tell he was young, married with children, and was from Fauquier County, and he will be gunned down here, leading his men in this fight amongst the tents at Loudoun Heights.
Yeah, he's killed instantly with a shot through the head, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, there's another officer, one of the very first officers. This one was an officer of Company A. Really good grabbing pictures out here. And you'll have to pardon my poor printer. It's beginning to be on its last legs. But this is William Thomas Turner, or Prince George's Tom, as they called him. And this, one of the first of Mosby's officers from June of 1863, was a fellow who took a bullet wound to the breast. He didn't die right off. He was mortally wounded. When Mosby's men have to retire from the field, and they do so taking a half dozen prisoners and 50 to 60 horses, different accounts on that, but a good number of horses, and they will head the way that Union fellows here of Cole's men would have expected they would have attacked, but never did. They will head due south on the Hillsborough-Harpers Ferry Turnpike, Harpers Ferry Road today, and heading towards Hillsborough. About halfway to Hillsborough, at the home of Levi Waters, prominent family, they will leave Prince George's Tom Turner, at that house, and they realize they may be leading him to be captured, but they are fleeing. Why are they fleeing? What has also happened with all the racket going on in the field?
Right, with all the gunfire and shouting and commotion that's going on up here, the garrison at Harper's Ferry becomes aware of this attack very early on. One of Cole's men manages to slip past the attacking Confederates, reaches a sentry on the bridge, a sentry from the 34th Massachusetts Infantry. Bells start ringing in Harper's Ferry. The infantry gathers, comes across, but by the time they reach here at Loudoun Heights, the fight is over. The fight really only lasts, by some accounts, 15 minutes, maybe as long as a half an hour, but it's a very sharp, short, and extremely brutal fight. So by the time the Union infantry arrives to reinforce the garrison here, the Confederates have already departed in the direction of Hillsborough. And overall, casualty-wise, what are we talking about for the Rangers? Obviously, we lose two outstanding officers.
Yes, one killed outright here, and another left and will die 5 days later. He's buried first at Hillsborough and later in Leesburg. There are another 6 of Mosby's best men, including another Lieutenant William Colston, who was a very prominent family here, and 3 wounded and 1 was captured. That for Mosby is a heavy group of casualties, and it, as Mosby will say, it's not just how many, it's who.
Right,
It's the quality that was lost.
Right, these are top men in
They
the
are
Rangers.
3 really excellent officers, so he's going to feel that, and that is why he will cry. That his plan that he thought was a near on to perfect plan, everything had gone their way despite the weather, and then at the last minute. As a matter of fact, he'll be furious. You know who he's going to blame. He's going to blame the unfortunate
Frank Stringfellow.
Frank Stringfellow. Let's bring up Frank here if we can find
Where's
his
Frank?
picture. Frank looks like he's from Central Casting.
Oh, yeah.
Prominent family. If you remember the PBS special,
Mercy Street.
Mercy Street,
Yep.
he's dating one of the girls in the hotel turned hospital, Emma Green.
Right.
And they kind of reference him, but only sideways. But so he's that guy. He will be blamed by Mosby for coming in a direction that Mosby had not anticipated. They had then fired, and of course, some of the casualties Mosby took were not from Vernon and his efforts in Cole's cavalry. It was from Mosby's own men. Friendly fire incident.
And speaking of casualties, it's certainly not bloodless on Cole's end of the battlefield either. Henry Cole's going to lose 4 men killed or mortally wounded, as well as about 14 or 16 men wounded, including Captain Vernon. Captain Vernon is shot in the left eye, will actually go down horrifically wounded during the fighting here. Does make a recovery, returns to service, serves throughout the end of the war, and actually goes on to play an incredibly prominent role in writing the history of Maryland soldiers during the Civil War. He's going to be one of the authors of the roster of Maryland soldiers.
Vernon's the man.
Yeah.
And when you look at this, I mean, you get shot in the eye and you're still yelling out orders and rallying your troopers. It's like, ooh.
And it's this fight, and I know you have a picture of Major Cole there. This fight's going to be influential as far as his cavalry command goes, because shortly after they defeat Mosby's Rangers here at Loudoun Heights, they are going to receive the attention of the Secretary of War. Secretary of War Stanton is going to not only commend them for defeating Mosby and his Rangers, but is going to authorize the expansion of Cole's cavalry from a battalion to a full regiment of cavalry. Cole will be named the colonel, Vernon becomes lieutenant colonel, and they're going to serve with distinction through the rest of the war. This will not be their last time tangling with Mosby either. I think they meet up again just a few weeks later in February, just outside of Upperville.
Yes, yes, they do, which is a very interesting other story of
Right.
Washington's birthday
I don't know if we have
weekend.
time to tell that story
No,
today,
we
but
won't, but that will be another road trip.
Absolutely.
What's interesting here as well is that Mosby's reaction to this is, I am never doing another nighttime raid. Think about it. This is Mosby, who made his fame on a nighttime raid at Fairfax Courthouse back in March of 1863, 10 months earlier, and stole a general out of his bed, General Edwin Stoughton of the Vermont Brigade, and he will not want to do that again.
Right.
Some people say this begins to mark the end of Mosby's Rangers. I think we would have to disagree in that Mosby's Rangers, as late as 1865, were still fighting to the very end, and indeed wiped out the Unionist independent Loudoun Rangers virtually near Harper's Ferry at Key's Switch just a few days before Appomattox, April 6th, and that's a year later. So you realize that this may be a turning point, but it's hard to say what the trajectory is after this for Mosby's Rangers.
It certainly made an impact on Cole's cavalry. One of the survivors of the fight here actually goes on to publish a poem written about his experiences here. It's displayed prominently on their regimental colors. I think for them, this is kind of almost a coming of age moment for them, that they were able to hold their own against Mosby under such kind of disadvantageous circumstances. So certainly an important moment for them, something that I'm sure no man on either side of the field that night forgot for as long as they lived.
What I would like to be is a fly on the wall, although on 10-degree January mornings, I doubt that there were many flies on the wall, back at Woodgrove, because Mosby's men returned to Henry Eaton's Woodgrove, where we began today, and thawed themselves out, ate, and obviously licked their wounds. The tales that would be told, the tears that would be flowing there would be legendary, but the war went on. We have months more to go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Rich. We always appreciate your expertise and your incredible ability to tell a story. Thank you guys for joining us on our trip. Just as a reminder, many of the locations that we visited today are privately owned. So again, we don't want you knocking on any doors today. But as you can see, so much of the landscape that plays a role in this story is preserved. This land behind us is preserved by the Old Dominion Land Conservancy. Another important part of the story is the effort to preserve these locations. So we appreciate the landowners who keep this land safe. We appreciate you for coming out, and we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining us.